This is a CNN special report.
Good evening. I'm Donna Kelly, and this is a special report. The killer storm the size of Georgia has made landfall at Charleston, South Carolina. At this hour, Hugo remains over the historic city. It's expected to make a gradual turn north and cause severe flooding as it moves up the East Coast. And joining us on the phone, our correspondent John Holloman, who is in Charleston. John.
Donna, let me just describe what I can see right now. Large limbs from pine trees that are blowing by in front of a van from which I am talking to you. They are moving about 5 or 6 miles an hour on the ground, blown by winds that are much, much higher than that. You can see pine trees that are bending over, probably 15 or 20 degrees out of being straight up and down. And everything is moving here, including this van, as it rocks back and forth. As more and more gusts of the backlash, the trailing edge of Hugo, come over us here.
John, have you left the building that you were in before that you said you could see through a hole in the roof?
Yes. When the eye came here, Donna, what they told us to do was evacuate the building, and they marched us from this building to another building that's built from concrete blocks. And I asked one person how long the eye would be over us, and they said about an hour. And I said, in that case, we should go back and try to send you some pictures. And so that's what we did a few minutes ago. Let me just interrupt myself here to tell you that the wind is blowing even harder now. Pine tree limbs continue to whip by right in front of my face. But yeah, we're out of that building. Sections of the roof have blown off of that building. And the other reporters who were in there, we believe, have gone on into the shelter of the concrete block building. But we decided it would be better for you, our viewers, to be out here in it so we could describe it to you.
All right, from Charleston, South Carolina, John Holloman, thanks so much for the information. And for the latest on Hugo, we go to the National Hurricane Center, and Bob Case is standing by to help us out. Mr. Case, can you tell us, after the eye of the storm, is the back part of the hurricane stronger?
Well, not necessarily. Normally, the worst conditions as far as the strongest winds, the possibilities of the tornado activity usually are in that right front quadrant. However, each hurricane is different. Now, I would suspect in this particular situation, along the coastal sections, the winds could be just as strong with the backside as they were with the front. And also, with the winds coming onshore like that, the storm surge should remain for another half hour, an hour, and then as the winds gradually die down, so will the higher tides.
Mr. Case, you mentioned the storm surge. For those who have been with us or who are just joining us, a little bit more, could you explain about just what that storm surge is and what that's expected to do at Charleston?
Well, a storm surge, I guess if we want to put it in perspective, everyone has blown on a cup of hot coffee. You blow too hard, the coffee goes out the other side of the cup. All day long, we've had 100, 130 mile-an-hour winds blowing on the surface of the ocean, blowing the surface of the ocean toward the land. Once it reaches the land, there's no place for that water to go, so it stacks up along the beach. So when we talk about a storm surge of 12 feet or 17 feet, we mean the water where the surf normally is now 12 or 17 feet above normal. And then superimposed upon that would be the waves created by 100 mile-an-hour winds.
All right, Bob Case at the National Hurricane Center, we appreciate you talking with us. And we want to check in with Chris Abel. He is in Wilmington, North Carolina. Chris.
Well, the Hugo is beginning to take its toll right here in Wilmington. Winds gusting up to 70, 75 miles per hour are blowing me over here, blowing some trees over, and they've knocked the power out as far as I can see right now. Actually, all I can see is the camera in front of me. The power is out at the hotel we're next to right here. You can't see anything in downtown Wilmington. I'm told by the authorities that the power is out, scattered power outages throughout the Wilmington area, 100,000 people here, including one of the shelters, I might add, where 300 people are trying to get out of the way of Hugo. They're without power here in town. We have we have a crew, I should say, over in the Wrightsville Beach area, about 15 miles from here, which is really getting the brunt of the storm more than here because we're buffered by the beach. A tidal surge there is expected at any moment of 10 to 20 feet. If that does occur, it will flood many of the homes, nice homes that are on the beach over there. Right now, the Sheriff's Department here in New Hanover County is patrolling the area in about 20-25 cars, trying to make sure people are okay, also making sure there's no looting going on. It really is pitch black here, so it's hard for them really to see what is going on until daybreak. Of course, we'll keep up with the situation. The rain itself has stopped for now, although it has come from time to time, and limbs keep flying by from time to time also as the storm comes up from the Charleston area along the coast. This is Chris Abel, CNN, reporting live, Wilmington, North Carolina.
Chris, do you have an idea of the folks in Wilmington? Do you get the idea that most of the folks are prepared? They knew that it was going to be fairly serious and they took enough precautions?
From what I'm told through the emergency authorities here, they feel that most of the people here were prepared. Many of them have gone through hurricanes in the past. They took the time to board up their homes. And the people that were the most affected, those out on the island, most of them have left. There's just a few remaining on the island, according to the Sheriff's Department. Others have left to come over here, which is, again, buffered from the storm. They're staying in shelters, they're staying in hotels, or with friends, and they're hoping to escape most of the damage. It remains to be seen if that does happen.
All right, from Wilmington, North Carolina, Chris Abel, thanks very much. We want to take a look at some of the damaging winds. We have this for you, Hurricane Hugo's winds, and this is as of midnight Eastern time. You can take a look. Gale force winds are over 39 miles per hour, and hurricane classified as, I believe it's over 74 or 75. Now you can see the hurricane force hitting between Savannah and Wilmington, and the gale force still around Savannah. Our correspondent Jeff Block was out earlier, and all of our correspondents this evening, you can see the wind as it hits them and get an idea of how strong these winds are. Gale force winds continue from Wilmington going up through Cape Hatteras. All right, our special report will continue in just a minute. And this is a CNN special report. We continue our coverage of Hurricane Hugo. Joining us on the telephone right now, Elizabeth Nabonet. She is the district manager for Southern Bell in Charleston, South Carolina. I wonder if you could tell us, Miss Nabonet, where you are right now.
I am in the middle of downtown Charleston at our emergency center for Southern Bell. We're very proud of the fact that, with the exception of 2 of our barrier islands, everyone still has telephone service because 79% of our facilities are underground, which comes in very handy during a situation like this.
You bet. So that means that all the emergency 911 and numbers like that would be working now.
That's true.
Are you getting very many calls?
In our command center, we are not. Certainly people out there are calling each other. There's one local radio station that's still on the air, and lots of people are calling in there to tell what's happening around their homes as far as fallen trees and water damage and that kind of thing.
But as far as you know, the emergency number, like say the 911, you're not getting a great deal of calls?
The 911 is not in this building, so I would not have any knowledge about the number of calls that they are receiving.
Was it any different for you when the eye of the storm hit?
It was a very eerie feeling because the winds that came through were 137.5 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden it was a total calm. It was very, very eerie. Some of us went downstairs just to look out and see what had happened, and their trees snapped off and power lines down and some water in the streets. And the back part of the storm now has started downtown, and roofs are ripped off and trees are continuing to fall.
All right, from Charleston, South Carolina, Elizabeth Nabonet, District Manager for Southern Bell there. Thanks very much. And joining us on the telephone, our correspondent, John Zarella. He is in Florence, South Carolina. John, what's going on there?
Well, Donna, about 10 minutes ago, the electricity finally went off after flickering on and off for about the past half hour. It's completely out now. There is generator power operating a few of the lights in the shelter that we are in at Wilson High School. Other than that, no electricity here. Again, as I've reported earlier, there have been huge flashes we've been seeing in the distance. Impossible to make out, certainly larger than transformers exploding. Huge blue flashes coming from the direction of Charleston. Again, impossible to tell what it is. And, of course, we have had the transformers. You can hear them exploding in the distance, and periodically we can hear the pine trees snapping. We're surrounded by pine trees here at this high school. They're not too close to us, but in the distance you can hear some snapping periodically. One of the interesting things here is that the shelter, we expected that right about now, with the winds finally kicking up, that more and more people would begin to try and make their way in at the last minute. But nothing of that nature yet has happened here. There are only maybe about 100, 150 people here. So we're wondering what the story is right now. If more people will try to make it in as the storm gets worse. And very interesting, you know, I've been in so many of these, and I've been in the middle of torrential rains usually, and it's very eerie. We have a lot of gusty winds, apparently gusting up maybe 45, 55 miles an hour, but very, very little rainfall.
I suppose we're directly in the path of the eye of the storm when it eventually gets here. But after having seen so many of these and been in so much rain, it's a very strange experience. Hardly any rain, just drizzle.
All right.
Donna?
All right, thanks. John Zarella in Florence, South Carolina. We want to go for the latest on Hurricane Hugo with Karen McGinnis. Karen?
Thank you, Don. If you give me a second here, I'll tell you about some of the observations that we have received. And one of the observations that we have not received is from Charleston, South Carolina. We spoke with Dick Cheneau. He's the chief meteorologist there in Charleston, South Carolina for the Weather Service there. And when I spoke with him on the phone several hours ago, he said, I can hear you, Karen, because the roof is rattling. The noise is so loud. We didn't receive any observations from him that following hour. And then 1 hour we did. And their observation said the eye is overhead, which had eerie connotations to us. And we have not heard from him in the past hour. Columbia, South Carolina, which is the capital of that state, is taking over their observations, letting us know kind of what's going on. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you've heard us talk about Myrtle Beach. We actually thought the eye would cross over the coast there earlier tonight, when in fact it has moved on shore at Charleston. They're reporting 75-mile-an-hour winds. Now, hurricane-force winds start at 74 miles an hour, so it's a terrible night. And Savannah reporting 60-mile-an-hour winds. We've recorded this just about 15 minutes ago, and there you can see the green indicates the heaviest precipitation. That's where you can find the strong winds. That's where you can find the heavy rain. That's where you can find the thunderstorms. That's where you have the potential for tornado activity. And there is a tornado watch in effect for all of the coastal sections of South Carolina, including portions of North Carolina, until 8 o'clock in the morning, and that is Eastern time. Here's what we have recorded over the past several hours throughout the evening hours, and I want to point out one thing here. You can see this open eye here. It's torn apart a little bit, but it's still closed nonetheless. But as it moves on shore just past the city of Charleston, you can begin to see that it fills in. What does this mean? Well, it shows that the storm is perhaps breaking down a little bit. Still a fierce storm, a Category 4 storm, meaning there could be extensive damage. Here is our loop from NOAA, and there you can see some of the big tops on these storms. What happened was when this storm moved over the Gulf Stream, and that is that very warm current which follows along the coast, it really picked up speed. That's why yesterday, about this time, we were reporting 105, 110-mile-an-hour winds, and then boom, this afternoon, 135-mile-an-hour winds, just 5 miles per hour less than when this storm moved over the Caribbean islands, and all week long we've been showing you the devastation there. Charleston, South Carolina, a low-lying city, perhaps the lowest lying along the eastern seaboard. We've had reports of a foot of water in the city of Charleston, and all is not over yet. We had the EEOC building reported some roof damage there. Even the Weather Service office there in Charleston apparently reporting some roof damage, and you've seen John Holloman report the damage that has been reported in some of those barrier places. Here's the projected path of Hurricane Hugo. We have updated this from our latest information as of midnight. We're bringing this storm a little bit closer in than we had before. We had this swinging out a little bit further to the left of your screen. We anticipate it will still be of hurricane strength Friday afternoon. I think when it gets up here just about across northern Virginia, it will probably contain just about tropical storm strength winds, but time will tell. We'll keep you updated. Patrick, Donna?
All right, Karen, thanks so much, and we will continue our coverage of Hurricane Hugo with our special reports right after this. And as we continue our special reports on Hurricane Hugo, this is a live picture you're looking at of Savannah, Georgia. You can get an idea. You can see the wind and the sheets of rain going along as you maybe even glance to the left or the right side of your picture. And you can see the lights will help you be able to see those sheets of rain as they go along. This is south of the eye of the hurricane. The eye of the hurricane went over Charleston, South Carolina. Our correspondent John Holloman told us it was an eerie, eerie feeling. Of course, the worst weather is north of the eye. But this is in Savannah, Georgia. We've had our correspondents there, Jeff Flock, and Larry Lamont, I believe, is there. And we are going to be checking in with them, of course, throughout the evening. Joining us on the telephone right now, Captain William McDaniel. He is with the Navy Hospital in Charleston. Mr. Captain McDaniel, I wonder if you can tell us, is the hospital a shelter?
No, it's not a shelter. We are fully staffed. I have about 500 of my staff in here with about 25 surgeons, and we expect, in as much as we're one of the 2 highest hospitals in Charleston, our access should not be cut off by any flooding, and we are prepared to take on any civilian or military casualties as required over the next 24 hours or so. Mm-hmm. At the moment, we have about 1,200 people in the hospital, including about 200 patients, about 80 of whom are civilian transfers from other facilities.
Mm-hmm. From this evening?
We started getting our first transfers in at 3 o'clock this morning, or yesterday morning, from one of the local nursing homes, which was a low-lying nursing home over on across Cooper River Bridge. They had already started getting surges and flooding, and we took in 24 of their patients about 22 hours ago.
Have you had any folks coming in with injuries from the hurricane thus far?
None whatsoever. And believe me, if you stand and look out the windows, you can understand why they're not coming in. It's horizontal rain and hard wind. Amazingly enough, once in a while we see a car go by, but we've only had one patient brought in. A lady went into early labor at one of the local shelters and was transported here by an ambulance about 4 hours ago. She's done very well.
Great, great. And how about your other patients who are in the hospital with you? How are they holding up under this pressure?
They're done extremely well. It's amazing that the morale and the attitude in the hospital amongst both patients and staff is outstanding. We structurally are doing pretty well. We lost all of our front windows and our front lobby of the hospital. We've got that area blocked off now. Otherwise, other than just water damage, we're doing very well. And as I say, morale and medical condition of all staff is outstanding.
All right, Captain William McDaniel, thanks very much for joining us from the Navy Hospital in Charleston. As we have been telling you, Hurricane Hugo is pounding the South Carolina coast. The eye of the storm scored a direct hit on Charleston, South Carolina. The heart of the storm passed through the historical city about 45 minutes ago. Hugo is pushing walls of water up to 20 feet high against the coast there. Parts of Charleston are under at least a foot of water, and the city is getting showered by rain. The storm has caused scattered power blackouts across the area, and branches, of course, are down all across the city. Charleston police were ordered off the streets until after Hugo passes. South Carolina was placed under a state of emergency yesterday. Many people in Charleston are riding out the storm at an evacuation center there. All right, joining us on the phone right now is Charlie Phillips. He is a resident of South Carolina, Mount Pleasant, I believe it is. Mr. Phillips, you have decided to stay through Hurricane Hugo. Why? Are you there, Mr. Phillips? Can you hear me? We'll punch a few more buttons and see if we can't get the line through. As you know, we've been having trouble with communication. Correspondent is in Savannah, Georgia. What's going on there, Larry?
Rain and strong winds continue to pelt Savannah, Georgia. I'm standing along the Savannah River in the old historic district. There have been some reports of trees blown down and some power outages, but the damage here has been minor as compared to other places. We're south of the eye of the storm. Earlier in the day, the Sheriff's Department, expecting a major blast to occur here, brought in some 200 personnel, and right now patrolling the streets of Savannah and the county are 200 different units. There's only been one reported case of someone trying to break into a building that had been left vacant because of the storm, but because of all the sheriff's units that are out here, they seem to have held that type of thing down to a minimum. There has been minimum damage as well. Many of the people are watching this storm from local bars and taverns, and so far they have had nothing to worry about, because the damage has been minimal. The winds have been moderate, and the rains have been moderate as well. They're not even expecting any tidal problems here in Savannah, so this part of the eye of the storm is breathing a great sigh of relief. And they're keeping their eyes out because anything could happen when a hurricane moves in. Larry Lamont, CNN, Savannah, Georgia.
sure can. Thanks very much from Savannah, Larry Lamont. You know, earlier we were talking about the communication and the problems that we have sometimes when we hit bad weather, and we talked about earpieces that we have and with our correspondents. And we thought it might be interesting for you folks to get a look at the behind-the-scenes look at the National Hurricane Center, which is in Coral Gables, Florida. And Bob Case is here, and he's going to give us a bit of a tour and tell us about all the folks it takes to help us learn this information. Bob.
Well, Donna, I think you're a day late and a dollar short. Maybe not the day, but at least the dollar. You should have been here about 3 hours ago, and you wouldn't have even been able to pan the camera around. But this is what happens when the hurricane makes landfall. Hurricanes are a coastal phenomena, and as soon as they hit the coastline and move inland, the hurricane center gets out of the picture as quickly as possible. For example, now, as the camera pans, we've got two of our forecasters who will cover the midnight shift. Now, up until the hurricane made landfall, there were at least 4 or 5 meteorologists into place. Now that the hurricane has made landfall and it's after midnight, Miles Lawrence is one of the hurricane specialists, and Jim Gross. Jim Gross is working a storm in the Pacific. We do have the Eastern Pacific to cover while all this mayhem is occurring in the Atlantic. And of course, Miles in the back there is a hurricane specialist that's working Hurricane Hugo. And as I say, all the excitement and most of the action is over for the time being here at the Hurricane Center.
Is this a time for you when you can kind of sit back and look at the storm a little bit more and kind of grab some bearings and then look when it kind of passes with the eye of the storm?
Well, see, the eye of the hurricane moved onshore about midnight, and once the eye of the storm moves onshore, the coastal problem they've had their problems. The storm surge is there. The strongest winds have already occurred. Now what happens, and the next stage in the scenario, we here at the Hurricane Center will transfer our responsibilities to Kansas City, who will write storm summaries for the next 2 days as what is left of Hugo passes up through the northeastern part of the country. And the local weather service offices, such as Columbia, South Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina,
sure.
The weather office in Washington will take over and follow the remnants of the storm.
All right.
The big problem now is going to be the flash flood problem.
Okay, all right. Bob Case, the National Hurricane Center, thanks for showing us around. Thanks very much. And our special coverage, continuing coverage of Hurricane Hugo continues on Newsnight Update in about a minute. Stay with us.